Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a project that sits at the absolute foundation of so many great DIY builds. Literally. We're talking about pouring a concrete slab. Whether you're planning a new patio, setting up a shed base, or extending your driveway, we're going to break down the exact sequence and the actual science behind getting a flawless, durable finish. I'm super excited to walk you through this, so let's jump right in.
Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Concrete feels incredibly permanent, right? Unlike a bad coat of paint, you can't just lightly sand it off if things go south. It's heavy, it's messy, and honestly, it can be pretty intimidating. But a perfect concrete slab isn't magic. It's really just a matter of respecting the chemistry of the materials and following a very specific, highly actionable roadmap. Once you understand the why behind the what, you are going to feel completely equipped to handle this.
Okay, let's dive into this chronological roadmap. We'll start in the dirt prepping the subgrade and forms. Then, we mix the perfect concrete. Next, we move fast for placing and screeding, followed by a slower pace for floating and final finishing. And finally, we'll cover the absolutely crucial curing phase.
All right, step 1, prepping subgrade and forms.
So this is definitely the heavy physical labor phase of the project, but I literally cannot stress enough how vital it is. The longevity of your concrete relies entirely on the ground beneath it. A rock-solid foundation is exactly what prevents future cracking, sinking, and buckling. Step 1 is excavation. You've got to remove all the soft dirt, grass, roots, and debris. Once it's excavated, you compact that subgrade so it doesn't settle later under the massive weight of the concrete. Then you lay your gravel, set your wooden 2x4 forms using a string line, and actually pay close attention to this detail. You have to pitch your slope. You want a slope of 1/8 of an inch per linear foot. That slight, almost invisible angle is what guarantees rainwater drains away from your slab and your house.
Now, regarding that gravel base, you're going to want it about 1 to 2 inches deep. Make sure to use a proper crushed aggregate or all-purpose gravel. Why? Well, because this porous layer gives ground moisture somewhere to go. It facilitates water flow and prevents substrate movement beneath the slab. Without it, ground shifts or freezing moisture can actually heave upward and snap your beautiful new concrete right in half. No way do we want that.
Before a single drop of concrete is poured, you need incredible attention to detail. You'll use straight 2x4 lumber and a reliable level for your forms. And when you build this frame, keep in mind that wet concrete is insanely heavy. It's essentially liquid rock. You absolutely must drive steel or wood stakes into the ground behind these forms roughly every 4 feet to brace them. If your forms blow out in the middle of a pour, man, it is a massive headache to fix.
Moving on to step 2, the perfect concrete mix.
Here is the absolute golden rule of concrete. As soon as water touches the cement powder, an irreversible chemical reaction called hydration kicks off. The clock starts ticking immediately, giving you exactly 2 hours. That's your magic window from the time the concrete is batched until it completely hardens and sets. This tight timeline is exactly why preparation is completely non-negotiable. You cannot be running around looking for your tools once the mixing has started.
To get the mix right, you have to be incredibly precise with your water. A really great way to test your mix consistency is something called the ball test. Basically, grab a handful of the mixed concrete with your gloves on and squeeze it. If the concrete is too wet, it won't hold together in a ball at all. And overwatering is a huge mistake because it drastically weakens the final strength of the slab. On the flip side, if it's too dry, it'll pack into a ball, but when you poke it, it breaks into stubborn chunks rather than crumbling easily. Dry concrete is just a total nightmare to work with. You want a mix that holds a ball shape but easily crumbles with a light touch.
Okay, here are some rapid-fire pro tips from the experts to help you nail that consistency while beating the clock. First, form a small crater in the center of your dry mix to hold the water. Second, once you know your exact water requirement, draw a line on your bucket so you can quickly fill successive batches without having to remeasure every single time. Third, mix for 3 minutes, then let it rest for 1 minute. And finally, consolidate the mix by tapping your mixing pan, wheelbarrow, or mixer with a rubber mallet just to force those trapped air bubbles out.
All right, step 3, placing and screeding.
This phase right here demands time-sensitive, highly physical action. You've got to get the heavy mud out of the mixer and into your carefully leveled forms before it sets. The absolutely crucial point here is how you deposit the material. You must place the concrete continuously as near as possible to its final position. Whatever you do, do not just dump the concrete in large separate piles and try to drag it horizontally across the forms. If you push or drag wet concrete too far, the fine mortar tends to flow ahead, separating from the coarser gravel. This is called segregation, and it leads to seriously weak areas in your final slab.
The secret to a perfect workflow is that it has to be seamless. You pour the new concrete right up against the previously placed batch to fill the forms uniformly. And then, bam, you immediately start striking it off. You move right from the pour to the leveling process so the concrete doesn't have a single chance to stiffen up in a pile.
So what is that leveling action? It's called screeding, or striking off. You and a buddy take a straight 2x4 or a magnesium screed board that's longer than your forms. With a person on each side, you firmly press the board down against the forms. You tilt the board slightly in the direction you're moving, and then you drag it across the slab using a side-to-side sawing motion. This totally shaves off the high spots, pushes wet concrete into the low voids, and leaves you with a perfectly flat surface that's level with your formwork.
Which brings us to step 4, floating and final finishing. Now we drastically slow the pace down. After a quick initial pass with a tool called a bull float to smooth out any ridges, the frantic action comes to a complete, totally necessary halt. This timeline is perhaps the most misunderstood part of all concrete work. As the heavy aggregate settles, water naturally rises to the surface to evaporate. This is called bleed water, and it creates a watery, glassy sheen on the slab. Listen to me on this. You must wait for this sheen to completely disappear before you touch it again. If you try to trowel or finish the concrete while that bleed water is on the surface, you will trap the water inside the top layer, completely weakening the surface and guaranteeing it'll flake and scale off later.
Once that wet sheen is totally gone, that's your green light to apply the final trowel coat. You can use a wood or magnesium hand float to smooth the surface. But a quick warning from the source materials. If this is an exterior project, like a patio or driveway, avoid using machine trowels to make it perfectly smooth. Over-troweling exterior concrete removes the entrained air and creates a surface that becomes incredibly dangerously slippery when it rains.
Instead of a glass-like finish, you want a textured, non-skid surface for those outdoor applications. And it's a delightfully simple technique. You literally just take an ordinary push broom, lay it on the damp surface of the slab, and gently drag it straight across. This creates uniform shallow grooves that give your driveway or walkway the necessary grip so nobody takes a tumble during a rainstorm.
And finally, step 5, the crucial curing phase.
Okay, you've edged the sides, you've broom finished the top, you've cleaned your tools, and the concrete looks hard. But guess what? The job is absolutely not over. Listen to this quote directly from the concrete supplier Kurdat Concrete because it is spot on. Curing is one of the most important steps in quality concrete construction and one of the most neglected. Seriously, if you skip this step, you are throwing away all the sweat and hard work you just put into the subgrade, the mixing, and the finishing.
Curing is all about protecting that chemical hydration process we talked about earlier. Concrete needs moisture and time to reach its full structural strength. The experts recommend applying a liquid cure and seal compound to the surface immediately after you finish exterior concrete. Furthermore, if you're pouring in cold weather, you've got to protect the fresh concrete from freezing for at least a week. You do this by covering the slab with insulated blankets or plastic-covered straw. The chemical reaction literally needs to be kept relatively warm and moist to do its job. So there you have it. We've taken a messy, intimidating, permanent material and transformed it into a logical series of actions. From compacting the dirt to respecting the bleed water, the science dictates the sequence, and the sequence guarantees the result. So the next time you walk across a flawless patio or a durable driveway that survived decades of weather, you'll know exactly what made it last. Now that you know the science, are you ready to grab a shovel and start digging that subgrade? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and happy building!